As a very small child, I was evacuated during the Second World War, and then just after the war, I came home and saw the appalling devastation around the city of London.
London was very black, soot-covered, and still a lot of bomb sites that hadn't been excavated. And it was generally quite a grim time.
We were living on rationing and 2 ounces of meat a week, most of which was gristle. And all of a sudden, something wonderful that was truly London had happened.
I worked in the building right across the street as a secretary on about the 7th floor. And at that time, they were excavating, and then one day everything went quiet. And so we went to the window and looked out, and we saw these people looking down and looking at something.
A fantastic discovery had been made. They discovered the Roman temple.
It was such a relief to have something new and different and positive and exciting that really accounted for its interest, because thousands of people queued to see it.
My friend said to me, "You've got to come down and see this dig." We queued for hours and hours and hours, 4.5 hours, I think. They had these great big walls all the way around, shutting off most of the crowd. We could just peep through the little holes. There was so much in the newspapers, It was absolutely thrilling to everybody.
It was a steady queue moving round. We couldn't stop there because there were so many hundreds of people piling up behind us, so we had to move round at a steady pace.
There were people clambering over them, picking up bits and pieces. And there was this sort of rather learned-looking gentleman with a clipboard. And I later discovered he was Professor Grimes. And he sort of explained and pointed out things, which was all quite sort of interesting and fascinating. But to some extent, I didn't really totally understand what I was seeing.
In 1954, my father and I came across this excavation and we peered through the hole in the fence, and obviously something tremendously exciting had just happened. We didn't know what it was, but we had a conversation with each other saying they must have found something tremendous. And it was in the press a couple of days later that they had found the Mithras head.
My father was on the site when they uncovered the head of Mithras, and the archaeologist in chief said to my father, who he obviously knew because he'd been there all the time, "Would you like to hold this head of Mithras?" And of course my father said yes. I remember him coming home and he said, "I held the head of Mithras in my hands today."
Not much good came out of the London Blitz, but Mithras did.
We were fighting back and we were re-establishing, but I think that's what Londoners were doing. They were saying, okay, this is London and you cannot bomb us, we will carry on. I think there was an element of that in it.
I did come back about 10, 15 years later and asked what had happened to it, and they said, "Oh, it's all been packed up and we're not sure what's happening to it."
It was such a disappointment to Peter when they covered it all up, because it was such a huge site and there was obviously so much more to see.
It always felt wrong that they moved it just up the road from here, and it feels absolutely right and proper that it's now back where it originally was.
to be actually inside this temple that I'd seen unearthed 60 odd years ago. It was just amazing.
You felt that you were actually entering into the atmosphere of the temple, and I felt that feeling of wonder and awe that this was something that you were experiencing that very few people, even at that time, would ever experience.
Roma regit populus, rex tu tamen omnium.
Nama Mithras.
All the technology used so well to evoke an atmosphere and to describe what was found and the significance of it. It's like being on another planet.
Peter, he would have liked it. He would have been happy that it wasn't prettied up or anything like that. Praise Bloomberg for doing what they've done, putting back what was able to be restored. I think it's done a very good job.
The reconstruction that was done in the 60s, they did their best with what they had, but it was disappointing compared with what I'd seen as a schoolgirl. To see the reproduction downstairs was just so exciting.
It's quite magnificent, it really is, because it's part of our history, isn't it? Our Roman history. And I was very happy to see it all.